Okay, Apple, you win. I picked up the MacBook Neo. Now, when I started making content, I was using a base model 8GB of RAM MacBook M1 to pretty much edit all of the things I need to do, photo, video, you name it. And when Apple releases a computer that's almost a third of the price of the one that I bought in 2019, financial responsibilities aside, I need something to compartmentalize my workflow. I have a home setup at home that's not the cleanest, but I want to keep it a home setup, but also when I'm on the go, also when I need to do social content, also when I just have regular tasks, I need something that's a little bit smaller, something more nimble, something more flexible, something fresh, something blue or indigo. Yeah, we'll get there. Get this done. I can get this done. I can get this done. I can get this done. Now, this is probably 150th video that you've seen on the MacBook Neo, but that's not going to stop me from telling you why I got one. Now, because this is kind of a new content type and a new territory, there's probably going to be people new to the channel here. And I work in a lot of video production scenarios. I'll do different client works, work on documentaries. I run this YouTube channel. And one big thing is I make a lot of social content because, well, that starts to pay your bills a little bit. And I want to make sure that things are compartmentalized. Right behind me, I do have my home setup, which is my M1 MacBook Pro, and that's hooked up to my speakers, my hard drive, my keyboards, and everything else. And oftentimes when I'm traveling and I convince myself that I'm gonna edit all these big projects that I need to work on, I'll take this guy, stuff it in a bag to go to the location and absolutely do none of it. And then I have to go back home, plug it back in, which is kind of a hassle. Sometimes things get lost, or if someone loses my bag, Air Canada, then I'm gonna have problems with only putting all my eggs in one basket. Where the MacBook Neo, I'm just trying to offset some of my tasks to it and also making sure that machine could actually handle it. Now, in terms of the specs that I do have the 8TB version because that's the only one you could get on the MacBook Neo, but I did get the 512 hard drive, so not only do I get the Touch ID, but you also get double the space for only $100. And if you're a student, you could actually get a further discount on your MacBook Neo. It's gonna be different depending on the country, but most of you guys are in the US, so I think it's like $600 or $700. Now, in terms of the MacBook Neo, one of the things I've heard a lot about is how surprised people are that you could edit video on the Sky. I'm a video person, that's kind of one of the main things I need to do, and how 8GB of RAM might not be able to cut it. Now, believe it or not, I've never used Final Cut Pro before in my entire life. I've been using DaVinci Resolve since 2019, and DaVinci Resolve does have a silicone version that works great on the MacBook Neo. So what I'm going to do is going to try to test out some of the footage on some of the cameras that I would use on the MacBook Neo to edit things like social content, small little tiny projects, or if I have like a single track YouTube video that I don't really have to do a lot of edits to. Now, a little bit of irony in this, we're actually going to test out opening up a YouTube window and editing at the same time. Now, typically, I probably wouldn't be watching YouTube and editing at the same time, but this is my timeline on DaVinci Resolve, and I'm going to go back here because this intro that you saw at the beginning of this video was all 8K footage. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to check my playback resolution. It's set to full, and then my timeline is set to 4K. Now, this is going to be pretty taxing on the computer. I wouldn't recommend using this, but this footage right here from the S1R2 is 8K open gate footage. So we're just gonna see if it even plays through. And I'm not expecting to get a lot of frame rates per second. One thing I did notice on the MacBook Neo is you have to like leave it a couple seconds before it starts actually going. So when I leave it for a bit, we'll see if it goes. She's not going. So we're gonna try pressing the play button. Like 7.5 frames a second. I don't think this is going to be super usable for a lot of people. I'm going to pause that real quick. What I am going to do is make a couple of adjustments. Now, I could change my project settings, go over to here, and it's not going to kill you, but if you try 1080p, you'll be able to do that. And I'm also going to change my playback to half. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to try this one more time. Give it a couple seconds. Bit of an improvement at 10.5. I'm going to pause that one more time. I'm going to just try taking out this window, and that way we can see if like the RAM tops out. My activity log is on here. It tops out. It gets pretty close to 8 when that YouTube window is open. Right now it's around 6. I should be okay. And let's try this again. And we have 24 frames a second. So if you close other windows and you change around your timeline playback, you should be able to watch this and scrub this through. I feel like I can even go to full screen on this. I'm gonna just kind of go into full screen. And it works. Now, This is not necessarily ideal for a lot of editors. They like having multiple tabs and windows and all the other stuff open. But like I mentioned before in setting expectations, this is going to be more of a social media machine for me. So things like making social content, making short YouTube videos, talking head stuff, that's going to be just fine. Playing 8K probably is a little bit overkill. Probably wouldn't do that as well. This stuff is going to be on the 6K. You know, I go to like fit. And that's kind of how we're looking at. So this will play. It will play back footage, but here's something you want to keep in mind is that you might want to close other windows. You might want to adjust your playback resolution. And yeah, that's just a very quick test. If you guys want to see me do this versus every camera that I have, leave a comment down below. Now, the MacBook Neo did perform pretty decently in terms of being able to do video and have tasks at the same time. And I'm sure for a lot of students, it's going to work really well. But also, I want to debunk the idea that this is only just for students. For one, if it can edit single track video with captions on it, then I feel like for a lot of people making content nowadays, especially short form stuff, this is going to work just fine. And two, what age do you think that people that make content actually are? For the most part, they're a younger generation, and having a laptop that's not going to break their bank, but they can still make things on their cell phones or a camera and still get things out and start a content career, while at the same time getting their degree or diploma or whatever piece of paper that's overpriced. They're going to be able to do that on this computer pretty readily, at least in a more smaller capacity. Now, there's a couple accessories that I do have, and one I have a question about a little bit because this is a little bit new for me, but I'm adapting my MacBook Pro workflow into the MacBook Neo to make my life a little bit easier. For one, it's going to be this charger. Now, the MacBook Neo does come with this little guy, which I think literally was meant for the phone. I think this is my iPhone charger. This guy plugs in via USB-C. The laptop itself is USB-C, and I'm just going to use a larger one here because it will be able to charge my laptop a lot faster. You could also pick one of these guys up when you buy things from the Apple Store. And I mean, this is just the USB-C cable, but one of the other things in the USB-C department is editing off of SSD drives. Now, I know these are more expensive than they used to be, but being able to edit off an SSD drive offloads some of the stress that you might put on your internal hard drive, and you could put everything onto here. In fact, any of the edits that I will be doing on the MacBook Neo, I'll just be editing off of one of my SSDs. This is a 1 terabyte SanDisk version. You don't have to buy this one specifically. I'll leave a link in the description down below for some of the ones that I do use, but this guy's read and write speeds are going to be plenty fast. So that way, if you want to edit off things like DaVinci Resolve or Final Cut Pro or Premiere, it's going to be a little bit quicker, and at the same time, it'll leave you some space on your hard drive because it could all be into here. In fact, give me 1 second. There's one other accessory I might have. Now, when we talk about dongles in a little bit, one of the things I did have a struggle with was being able to get stuff off of like a card over here. This is my CF Express Type B card, putting it in a dongle and then putting it into this hard drive. Because there's only one fast USB port, what you're doing is you're kind of splitting the speeds through multiple different USBs onto here, which is going to have me asking 2 questions. For one, does anyone have a better dongle for the MacBook Neo? And two, Angelbird makes this thing called a PKT SSD CF Express Type B reader, which is a name that I might have gotten wrong. But when you put this in an enclosure and then you have a little, I don't know, let's kind of grab one of these guys here. It's not the actual cable you want to use for it. You could plug this guy into here and it acts sort of like an SSD drive. So I could actually edit right off the card depending on how fast the cards you're going to use are. Now, if you're using SD cards, it's a bit different, but if you're using CF Express Type B, they also have Type A and they have SD as well, but you can use these as little tiny SSD drives specifically if you want to edit off of them. And the CF Express cards are actually a lot faster, so they might be like little tiny SSD drives. So that's something you want to keep in mind if you are editing social content. You just want to back up to this a little bit later, a little bit further work there. Now, the MacBook Neo is supposed to fit in this kind of EDC travel content kit that I want to have. So that way it's specifically compartmentalized for one reason and one reason only. And that way, whenever I'm going somewhere, I just put everything in a bag and it's the same thing every time. And it makes my life a little bit easier because I'm realizing as I get older, if things aren't sectioned off in certain places, I'm going to get frustrated, forget something. So I want everything to be in one place. Now, that's going to have things like having headphones and a microphone for voiceovers for these YouTube videos. Obviously, we talked about some of the things for workflow. I have a Nikon ZR that I really like for making that type of on-the-go content while still having great image quality. And as well as I do have a set of Typox Americis where I'll bring in like 1 or 2 of those in a backpack. So that way I'm able to have things that are very reminiscent of a kit that I would have with a bigger cinema camera, but everything fits into a backpack. Now, if you guys want to see like a full EDC of what I'm going to use, because I do leave for another trip in about 10 days, leave a comment down below. But basically what I'm trying to say in the workflow of the MacBook Neo is that a lot of the things that I do when I'm out and about Canadian. I probably said a boot. A lot of the things that I do when I'm traveling is going to be social content. And then when I have bigger projects where I have to take a lot of footage back home, I could stuff that on a hard drive overnight in a hotel, and then I could work on it exactly where I think I'm going to work on it, which is in the comfortability of my own house, because I don't really work on big projects when I'm out. So that's just me admitting that to myself. Now, there's also probably going to be some limitations of using the MacBook Neo. I'm not here to tell you that you should use this to replace your entire workflow, because that would be a lie. And Apple didn't even pay me to do this video. I paid for this video on my own. So there's my virtue signal in the tech space for today. But what I want to talk about here is some of the limitations of the MacBook Neo and the reason why it can't take over everything. For one is going to be the RAM, which is kind of like talking out of two sides of my mouth. But what I want to point out here is that 8 GB of RAM is going to be fine for a lot of tasks, especially for the people that MacBook Neo is made for. But sometimes over time what ends up happening is that RAM runs a little long in the tooth. That M1 MacBook Pro with 8 GB of RAM, the base model that I had like 7 years ago, eventually it ran a little bit slower, which might be a combination of me filling up the hard drive or a combination of things getting a little bit more RAM intensive over time. That is something you might want to keep in mind when you have a computer just like this, but also at the same time, it's half as much as the MacBook Air. You could always just buy another one, or you could trade it in and you can get a MacBook Air later on if you graduate from having a MacBook Neo. However, at the time of this video, for what I need it for, everything works just fine. Also, you want to keep in mind on MacBooks, you can't really change anything for almost any of their computers. So everything that you choose is a pretty committed decision. You can't choose things like your RAM or your hard drive or anything else after the fact. So whatever you're going to pick, you're probably going to commit. That almost rhymed. One of the big things on this guy as well, and I know this is probably going to drive people crazy, is going to be those USB ports. Yes, there's one faster, one slower, one you could use for charging and it'll do just fine, one you could use for actually editing off of hard drives and stuff like that. But one of the things I did realize when I use that dongle, when I plug it in, it starts to split the speeds up a little bit, and trying to transfer files in the dongle from a card to something else, even transferring like 20 gigs of information, which takes my MacBook Pro like 8 seconds to do, almost didn't work on the MacBook Neo. Okay, so editor's note here. I made a mistake. This was the reader case. This is a PGY Tech. This is from Ugreen. You get both on Amazon. That's beside the point. I plugged it into here. And as I mentioned before, one of these is fast. This is going to be great for transferring. One of these is slower, which is going to be this one. Now, plugging this guy in, it'll still split up these guys. This is like a 10 gigabit per second. I think it's a gigabit. Yeah, it's a 10 gigabit per second. That is going to be pretty much as fast as I can get it going into here. But if I am going through the dongle like into here, it splits it up a little bit. It's a little bit slower than my MacBook M1. This is the timeline, and yeah, just be careful which one you use here. Your computer will actually tell you, just be careful how you do this. Now, in terms of some of the work I'm going to do when I'm in Edmonton, I'm just going to leave it overnight because I'm not going to need it until I get home. In fact, I actually think I could just record directly to SSDs, or I don't have to edit it. So like, I don't have to do any editing at all. So I'm pretty much going to have an adjusted workflow for that, but that's beside the point. Basically what I'm trying to say here is that this laptop is going to be very popular because with cheaper and cheaper technology, something that it's exposing, which I've realized in cameras, is that some people might have overinflated the thing they needed out of their technology and out of their devices, and they've gone to something smaller and figured out that that works just fine. For example, the Nikon ZR costs half as much as a Sony FX3. Those are two cameras that are differentiated by like $2,000. And some people that bought an FX3 because they wanted a small compact camera that had great image quality found out that they could spend half as much money and arguably get a better image out of it. Now, there's other things involved in that as well, and this is not a video about those two cameras, but what I'm trying to say here is that the MacBook Neo exposed something for a lot of people that use their computers, and it's maybe the idea that you don't need all of the bells and whistles, but I also need a couple of those bells and whistles because it actually works really well with editing video and social content, so I'm going to keep that for a little bit. Who knows if I'll keep it for the long term, but so far, I'm pretty happy in my first impressions. But if you guys want to see more videos about the MacBook Neo, because I have an idea. Everyone's put it up against 8K footage, 6K footage, 4K footage, but nobody's tried 12. Yeah, well, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.